Thank you, Indian American Muslim Council, for the opportunity to speak. In recent years, right-wing advocates that purport to represent Hindus have promoted a peculiar narrative to prop up international support of India's major abuses toward religious minorities. By using human rights rhetoric, many Hindutva supporters have falsely argued that religious freedom is not under threat in India, and anti-Muslim BJP policies are actually moral necessities. Hindus for Human Rights is a progressive organization that advocates for human rights in South Asia and North America from a Hindu faith perspective. We aim to advocate for an inclusive vision of Hinduism and challenge right-wing Hindu ideas about India. Today, I want to briefly discuss how pro-Hindutva advocacy groups often frame Indian human rights issues and challenge some of these interpretations, particularly with regard to the state of religious freedom in India, the military occupation of Kashmir, and the Citizenship Amendment Act. When we talk about religious freedom in India, it is very common for people to say there's no issue. The recent Pew study on religion in India found the vast majority of Indians, including minorities, feel that they can practice their religion freely. Thankfully, we do not see the mass atrocities against religious minorities in India that we see in China and Saudi Arabia. But religious freedom is more than simply the freedom to believe and attend a house of worship, which, by the way, many Dalit Hindus are still unable to do. If a particular religious community is targeted because of their belief practices, appearance, or diet, if their freedom of speech is being curbed, or if their citizenship is being threatened because of their religion, that is also a threat to religious freedom. This is what is happening to religious minorities in India today as they disproportionately face detention without trial, the threat of citizenship loss, and lynchings. We can have arguments about what to do about these facts, but the fact is that religious freedom is under a severe attack in India because of the policies of the ruling party. Some pro-Hindutva organizations have argued that India's 2019 revocation of special status for Jammu and Kashmir was necessary to protect the region from terrorism and allow Hindu Kashmiri Pandits who were forced out of the region in the 1990s to return to their homelands. But in India's efforts to supposedly fight terrorism, the government jailed political leaders, denied internet access for 18 months, and significantly restricted press freedom and public protest. In the meantime, thousands of Kashmiri Pandits have been forced to live in poor conditions as internally displaced people in Jammu and Delhi. Kashmiri Hindus currently living in the valley have reported facing increased risk from local resentment of Hindu nationalist policies. What is clear is that 1, the BJP has used the threat of terrorism to curtail human rights to millions of Muslims, and 2, the BJP has failed to solve the challenge of terrorism or take care of the needs of Hindu Pandits. The rhetoric that Kashmir's occupation is a human rights move is an attempt to cast a sheen over India's cruel denial of basic freedom to Kashmiri Muslims. When the Citizenship Amendment Act passed in 2019, organizations that purport to represent Hindus argued that the law was necessary to protect religious minorities fleeing violence in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. There is no question that the threat facing religious minorities in these countries is severe. But the CAA notoriously created a broad exclusion of Muslims, violating India's constitutional requirement for equal treatment of all religions and keeping persecuted Muslim communities like Ahmadiyya and Shia Muslims from attaining long-term asylum. Furthermore, because India is creating a National Register of Citizens, or NRC, that would require all Indians to prove their citizenship, Indian Muslims unable to prove their citizenship would not be protected by the Citizenship Amendment Act, facing the risk of detention and deportation. Under the guise of refugee policy, CAA poses a dangerous threat to India's freedom of religion and has thus far failed to protect any persecuted Hindus or Sikhs. More than a year after the CAA passed in 2019, hundreds of Hindu and Sikh refugees have returned to Pakistan. India has long been a refuge for persecuted people from around the world, and it should continue to be that for everybody, including Muslims. I have 2 core beliefs that are central to my identity as a Hindu. 1, a belief that every human being is inherently divine. And 2, that there are many paths of worship and all end in God. HFHR's faith values lead us to fight for all religious minorities, whether in India, Pakistan, or the United States. In addition to being critical of Hindu nationalist arguments that invoke human rights, I urge you to raise your voices on the deteriorating religious freedom situation in India. Pay attention to when Hindu groups speak and when they remain silent about religious freedom. Hindu nationalists certainly do not represent all Hindus. There is another Hindu vision for the world, an inclusive one. Thank you.